Our new Pope has been in the media a lot for the last 6 months since he was elected as our chief shepherd, and even more lately in the last couple weeks after his 18-hour interview with several magazine editors from around the world. And what is becoming clear as a message deep and dear to his heart that he's trying to communicate to the world is that he's really trying hard to get us off treating people like issues and on to treating people like people. Don't think issues, he's saying. Think people. Don't think statistics and categories. Think persons. The singular example that has come up several times in his interviews now, including this one, was his earlier response on the issue of homosexuality, when he said his now notorious quote after he was asked what does he think about that issue of being gay in people's lives. His response to that question was another question. Who am I? Who am I to judge? Wait a minute, Pope. Isn't that part of a pope's job description, to judge? Well, maybe if it's not his, maybe it shouldn't be ours either. Don't think issues. Think people. Don't think statistics and categories. Think persons. This kind of thinking could revolutionize the world. And the world, my friends, has taken notice. The story Jesus tells this morning in today's gospel stands as a warning to us, a warning to the world, actually, of what happens to humanity and what happens to each of us individually in this human experience. What happens when we treat people like issues. And it ain't pleasant. You see, to treat people like issues instead of as persons, something has to die in us. To make it possible for us to judge them, to dismiss them, to ignore them, to look down on them, to blame them. My friends, to get by with this and to not deal with each person as person, something has to die in us. Something big, something important has to die in us. Something we need to be happy, really, and at peace. Something as natural to us as our breathing, like that most natural gift called compassion. Compassion has to die to do that to a human being. Maybe not all at once, but here and there and more and more and more until it's gone. To let this particular human being in front of me right here be nothing more than an issue, our care has to die. Our desire to connect, our awareness that this is a sister, a brother, or Christ himself has to die. And ultimately, our very consciences, our human conscience that helps us do the right thing and do what's good, it has to die. And the tragedy is there comes to be this chasm, this huge abyss opens up between people, between human beings. I call it the distance of difference. The distance of difference becomes too far now to traverse anymore, from me to you, from me to them. The damage, almost irreparable. And the chasm becomes too wide, too deep, for too long to bridge anymore. Unbreachable. Please take note. This story that you just heard Jesus tell, it's not a reprimand in itself. It's not a reprimand to the rich man for being rich. In this particular story, there's nothing wrong with the rich man being just that, rich. This is not a diatribe against money. But it does say to be careful, to be very careful, because it's very possible that with our wealth enables the rich man, us, to live a very unique life, to live in our own little self-contained world. Perhaps his place of hard-earned privilege made it easy for him to look down from that perch on others. Yet the story also puts us on notice just about how true it is that my money and my things can create a chasm between me and other human beings. That if I have means, if I come from money, I had best be aware of how far this is likely to remove me from the poor, and how different they become from me then, so that it becomes harder and harder to connect, harder and harder to even see them. Oh, I notice them, but do I see them? But again, this story is not about money per se. The story is about the chasm. This is about the chasm that is destroying people on both sides of the abyss. It could have easily been about education. Who has more or less education than I? Who goes to what school and I don't? It could be about neighborhoods. It could be about ethnicity. It could be about immigration. It could be about sexual orientation. It could be about gender. Groups with different politics or religions from my own. It could be people with mental handicaps, people in nursing homes, people on those soup lines, all those in the world that the world so easily writes off, that it's so much easier to just group into a category and file away. It's anything, this gospel is saying, it's anything that keeps people apart, anything that creates distance between human persons, anything we let make people too different from us. So we end up in our little academic worlds, and we become so oblivious, so unaware of what others are suffering to live with that issue, to what others are suffering and what they love and what they dream for still as a human person, still, about what they miss, about what they enjoy. We live in our ivory towers of good hygiene and nice things and think we don't need those folks who live under the bridge. And here lies the true human tragedy. The rich man knew better. He knew better. He knew better. He knew what was the good and the right thing to do, and he ignored it. He had better things to do to occupy his attention. He couldn't be bothered in his little self-contained, self-satisfied life. So do we. We know better. We really know better. Like the rich man in that story, we've been warned. We've been coming to church for how many years? We've heard gospel after gospel from this Lord Jesus. He's even been raised from the dead to validate, to say yes to this teaching that it's really for real. And yet, even though we know better, we continue on as we always did. Heinrich Himmler. I'm sure the name rings lots of bells. Heinrich Himmler. He was one of the main Nazi leaders of the Holocaust. He had a group of his generals gathered who were in charge of all the various concentration camps, which, as we know, ended up killing some 11 million human beings. 11 million who were innocent Jews, gays, gypsies, blacks. And as he gathered there with these leaders of all those concentration camps, together he said to them, and I quote, "You know what makes us so great? That we can do this thing we have to do and then go home and be good and decent husbands and fathers." We can do this thing we have to do and then go home and be good and decent husbands and fathers. Wait a minute. We just killed 11 million husbands and fathers and mothers and children. But we're good and decent? What has to die inside of us so that we can do this? What has to die inside of ourselves so we can distance ourselves like this from others? How much do we have to numb our consciences to do this? As to not see their pain anymore. As to not know that this is a brother or sister to me. That we're the same on the inside. We forget we're in it together. It doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to end this way. We have been warned. Last Holy Thursday, our Pope did what every Pope before him ever did on any Holy Thursday. He washed feet. But he is the first Pope in human history that we know of, the first Pope, to get down on his knees this time and wash the feet of women. Of Muslims, of prisoners, of immigrants, of the homeless. And he broke liturgical rules to do it. If we're paying attention, this is going to start messing with us. If we're listening, this is going to start messing with what we've always assumed is okay. Our new Holy Father is shouting with his life. When you look at people, don't see issues. See people.